Back to the Middle East now, and what increasingly looks like the all-out war between Israel and Hamas. With us now in southern Massachusetts is Naseer Aruri. He's professor emeritus at the University of Massachusetts and the recent author of Dishonest Broker, the Role of the United States in Palestine and Israel. Mr. Aruri, welcome to NewsNight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Is the situation, as we just build it, is it more Israel versus Hamas than it is Israel versus the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas?
Well, I think it is really more accurate to say that it is Israel versus the Palestinian people, not only the Palestinians who live in the occupied territories, but all Palestinians, whether they are in the diaspora or the Palestinians in Israel itself. There is a Palestinian consensus here, which is based really on two simple notions, one of which is supported by the global consensus for a long time, and that is the end of the occupation, and the occupation is 36 years old. And the second one is the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside Israel, which is something mentioned in the roadmap. Actually, both of these are mentioned in the roadmap.
But Hamas is certainly getting a lot of attention for very negative reasons. They've been behind many of the recent bombings. They seem to be getting stronger politically. Is that the case? Are they growing stronger?
Well, actually, Hamas has been growing stronger, particularly during the Oslo period. Hamas goes back to 1987, and I think that people might know or would like to know that there was a time that Israel used to promote Hamas as a counterweight to the secular nationalist, i.e. to the PLO. But today things are different. Hamas is been very dissatisfied with the Oslo process, particularly with the concessions that the people kept thinking that Arafat's concessions have really bottomed out, but they never seemed to bottom out. And so Hamas began to rival the PLO and to put the brakes on them in order not to keep giving up on the national rights.
And
I think I should mention here...
Sorry. In Gaza and the West Bank, from what I've read, Hamas, it's not just political and it's not just military, but it's also they're providing schools, they're providing social services. Isn't that the case? This is more than just seen as a military movement.
Absolutely. I think that Hamas's infrastructure, actually, their social, educational, social welfare infrastructure had remained somewhat intact compared to the infrastructure of the Palestine Authority. Maybe it would not be exactly correct to say intact. I think that all Palestinian institutions have suffered during the past 2.5 years. But Hamas is an organization that has a large constituency. Some relate to it ideologically and some benefit from it. And some, I think, see it as an organization that is putting the brakes on Abbas. I think that Hamas was dissatisfied with the speech that Prime Minister Abbas made at Aqaba in Jordan during the summit with President Bush, because they felt that he said more about Palestinian violence than he said about Palestinian rights that are recognized by the international community. So
would you agree,
dissatisfaction.
Though, let me just ask you we don't have a lot of time, but one last quick question. Would you agree that Hamas has got to come on board in order for anything to move forward on the roadmap? And is that possible?
Well, in fact, I think it is very possible. You see, on the 25th of May, there's an article in Haaretz, which is a leading Israeli daily, that quoted Dr. Rantisi, against whom Israel launched an attack and tried to assassinate him just 2 days ago. Rantisi offered a ceasefire, what they call in Arabic hudna, a ceasefire, if the Israelis stop targeting Hamas leaders and if they give up this policy of assassinations. On June 2nd, a few days later, just before going to the summit conference in Aqaba, Prime Minister Sharon is quoted in Haaretz again as saying that he insists on Abbas dismantling the infrastructure of terrorism. In other words, he's saying that I don't really want your ceasefire, I want your demise. So basically, they were placed in a non-negotiable position here. But I really believe that Hamas, just as the PLO, just as the independents in Palestine, would like to reach a settlement that would end the occupation, that would deliver them out of the misery in which they live under economic siege, not knowing whether they can finish the journey when they embark on going to a school, to a hospital, or someplace. What they want is an end of this occupation, and
let's end it on that positive note. Let's end it on that positive and hopeful note. Naseer Aruri, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome indeed.